The Queen's Dilemma and the Great Challenge. The Kingdom of Zonbara was a land of beauty and prosperity, where golden fields stretched beyond the horizon, and rivers ran as clear as the morning sky. At its heart stood the grand palace of Queen Eshe, a ruler both wise and powerful. She had led her people with unwavering strength, protecting them from invaders, ensuring justice for all, and upholding the ancient traditions of the land. But despite her glory, Queen Eshe was deeply unhappy. No one in the kingdom understood why. They saw her adorned in the finest silks, sitting upon a throne of gold, and commanding an empire that flourished under her rule. Yet behind the veil of her royal power, a secret pain tormented her. She had never found true happiness, not in love, not in companionship, not even in the embrace of the most celebrated warriors and noblemen. No man had ever satisfied her. Her sadness grew heavier with each passing year, like a storm cloud that refused to break. Until, at last, she made a decision that would shake the very foundation of Zonbara. The Great Challenge. One morning, as the sun rose in a fiery burst of orange and gold, Queen Eshe stepped onto her palace balcony and addressed her people. The royal town square was filled with villagers, nobles, warriors, and travelers who had come to hear their queen speak. She raised her voice, strong and unwavering. I, Queen Eshe, ruler of Zonbara, have made a decree. I seek a man who can bring me true happiness. A murmur spread through the crowd, curiosity and excitement buzzing like 1,000 bees. Whoever can satisfy me, she continued, shall be rewarded beyond their wildest dreams. He will receive a golden chest filled with treasures, lands stretching as far as his eyes can see, and a place by my side in the royal palace. The crowd erupted in whispers. Is she searching for a husband? A woman asked. No, muttered an old man. She searches for something far deeper than love. Men from all over the kingdom, hunters, warriors, noblemen, and even traveling sorcerers, stepped forward, eager to prove themselves. From the farthest reaches of Zonbara came mighty warriors with the strength of lions, charming noblemen with tongues of silk, and fearless hunters who had slain beasts twice their size. Each one confident, proud, and ready for the challenge. One by one, they entered the queen's private chambers. And one by one, they failed. A challenge no one could win. The first to step forward was Baraka, the warrior known for his iron fists and unmatched stamina in battle. I have fought in countless wars, he boasted, stepping into the queen's chambers. I will surely satisfy my queen. The doors shut behind him. The people outside waited. A minute passed. Then two. Suddenly, a loud scream tore through the palace halls. The doors burst open, and Baraka stumbled out, his face pale as the moon, his body shaking as if he had seen a ghost. Impossible, he gasped before running away like a frightened child. The villagers gasped in shock. How could the mightiest warrior fail? But the queen remained silent, her expression unreadable. Then came Dumo, the nobleman with the golden tongue, known for his charm and way with women. I will succeed where others have failed, he said with a sly smile. He stepped into the chamber. Moments later, a loud crash was heard, followed by his desperate cries for help. The doors flew open, and Dumo came tumbling out, his once pristine robes torn, his confidence shattered. The people grew afraid. But still, more men stepped forward. Tajiri, the fearless hunter. Mwamba, the chieftain's stronger son. Ose, the great traveler who had conquered the hearts of many women. One by one, they entered. One by one, they failed. Some staggered out, drenched in sweat. Some collapsed to the ground, unable to stand. Some fled without even a word, as if they had seen something unnatural. The villagers began to whisper in fear. Is our queen cursed? The queen's enchanting dream. That night, Queen Eshe sat alone in her chambers, staring into the flickering flames of her lantern. Why? she thought. Why can no man satisfy me? She closed her eyes, her heart heavy. Her mind drifted, and soon, she fell into a deep slumber. Then, in the depths of her dreams, a voice called to her. It was a voice unlike any she had ever heard before. Deep, enchanting, otherworldly. Eshe, it whispered. The queen's breath hitched. She saw nothing, only shadows moving in the mist. Yet, she could feel its presence. Something powerful. Something ancient. Who are you? She asked in her dream, her voice barely above a whisper. I have watched you, my queen, the voice said, slow and deliberate. I know your sorrow. I know what you desire. A sudden warmth spread through her body. She wanted to see him, to reach out and touch the one who spoke to her. But just as she lifted her hand, the shadows disappeared. She gasped, her body jolting awake. The room was silent. The lantern still flickered beside her. Had it been a dream? Or something more? Her heart pounded with anticipation. Who was that voice? And more importantly, would he return, the arrival of the mysterious stranger? The challenge continued. Day after day, new men arrived at the palace. Mighty warriors, cunning traders, wise scholars, each believing they could succeed where others had failed. But no man pleased the queen. The villagers whispered in fear. Perhaps no mortal man can satisfy her. Perhaps she is cursed, or perhaps she is waiting for something greater. The queen sat upon her throne, watching the sun set over the grand kingdom of Zonbara. The sky bled into hues of crimson and gold, a breathtaking sight, yet her heart remained untouched. She had begun to lose hope. And then, on a night when she least expected it, everything changed. A night unlike any other. It was late. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silver glow over the palace. The corridors were silent, save for the occasional whisper of the wind through the grand windows. Queen Eshe lay in her chambers, dressed in a fine silk robe, staring up at the carved wooden ceiling. Sleep had eluded her for weeks, but that night, her body felt unusually heavy, as if the air itself were pressing down on her. Just as her eyes began to close, a strange sensation crept over her skin. The air shifted. A presence. Her heart quickened. Before she could move, she felt it, a touch unlike any other. A warm, powerful hand brushed against her arm, its touch both gentle and commanding. She inhaled sharply. Who is there? She whispered, her voice barely audible. There was no answer. But she felt him. A presence so overwhelming that it sent shivers through her spine. Her body reacted before her mind could question. A sensation spread through her, deeper than anything she had ever known, consuming her, filling the emptiness she had carried for so long. It was not like the others. There was no desperation. No struggle. Only pleasure. Only contentment. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. She did not resist. She did not ask questions. She only let go. And when the night was over, and her breathing had steadied, she drifted into the most peaceful sleep of her life. The empty morning. When the sun's golden rays slipped through the ornate windows of her chambers, Queen Eshe stirred. Her body felt light, as if a burden had been lifted from her. For a brief moment, she smiled, a genuine, contented smile. But as her senses sharpened, she realized something. She was alone. The warmth she had felt in the night had vanished. The mysterious stranger, whoever he was gone. Her breath hitched. Was it all a dream? She sat up, scanning the room, her eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. But there was nothing. No trace of him. No sign that anyone had been there. Her fingers trembled as she touched her own lips, as if trying to remember the feeling. He had been real. Hadn't he? She stepped onto the cold marble floor, wrapping her robe tightly around herself. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the grand doors of her chamber. Did the guards see anyone enter? Did anyone hear anything? She hesitated before calling them. No. She did not want them to know. Some things were meant to remain a secret. A longing that would not fade. That day, Queen Eshe moved through the palace as if in a trance. She attended meetings, listened to disputes, oversaw the affairs of the kingdom, but her mind was elsewhere. Her advisors noticed her distraction. Her servants whispered among themselves. Even the villagers, who only saw her from a distance, could sense that something had changed. Do you see the queen today? One woman whispered to another at the marketplace. She looks different. Yes, she seems at peace. Could it be that someone has finally satisfied her? It was true. The queen, for the first time in years, radiated a quiet joy. But despite the warmth in her heart, a single question tormented her. Will he return? The secret visit. That night, Queen Eshe did not sleep. She sat awake in her chamber, waiting. The candlelight flickered. The wind howled softly outside. And then, she felt it. A shift in the air. A presence. A touch. She gasped as a familiar warmth enveloped her. He was back. Again, she felt his touch, soft yet firm, like silk wrapped around steel. Again, she surrendered to him. And again, before the morning came, he was gone. Vanished. But this time, she did not question it. She smiled, rolling onto her back, her eyes heavy with sleep. He would return. She knew it. Night after night, the stranger came to her. Never speaking. Never revealing his face. Only touching. Only giving her the one thing no man had ever given before, true pleasure and contentment. And every morning, he would disappear, leaving no trace of his existence. The queen's transformation. As the days passed, the queen's happiness became undeniable. She walked with a lightness in her step. Her laugh, once rare, echoed through the halls of the palace. She smiled at her servants, something she had never done before. Even the kingdom itself seemed to flourish under her newfound joy. The crops grew greener. The rivers ran clearer. The people felt safer. It was as if her pleasure was woven into the very fabric of the land. And yet, no one knew the secret that kept her heart full. No one knew of the stranger who visited her in the dark. But the queen's joy would not last forever. For while she basked in the glow of her happiness, a secret was forming within her. A secret that would soon change the fate of Zonbara forever. A child was growing inside her. And its father was nowhere to be found. The queen's secret and the rising suspicion. The days in Zonbara turned to weeks, and the queen's happiness continued to radiate across the kingdom. Yet, something unthinkable was happening inside her. A secret growing inside her. One morning, as Queen Eshe sat before her grand mirror of polished ivory, she noticed something different. Her face glowed with a light she had never seen before. Her body, once strong and lean, now carried a softness, a fullness. She placed her hand gently over her stomach. A deep feeling of knowing settled inside her. She gasped, standing suddenly. No, it cannot be. But she knew. Something was growing inside her. A child. His child. The queen staggered back onto her throne, her breath coming in short gasps. I am with child. But who is the father? The realization sent a mix of emotions through her, joy, wonder, and terror. She knew nothing about him. Not his face. Not his name. Not where he came from. Nothing. And yet, she carried his seed. The kingdom begins to whisper. It did not take long for the people of Zonbara to notice the change. The queen, who once carried herself like a lioness in battle, now moved differently. Her hands rested on her stomach more often. Her steps were slower, more careful. Her appetite increased. And most of all, her glow had changed. The villagers whispered among themselves. "Have you seen the queen?" one woman asked in the marketplace. "Yes, she walks like a woman who carries life inside her." "But, who is the father?" The whispers grew. "The queen has not taken a husband. There was no royal wedding. Has she been bewitched?" The rumor spread like wildfire. Inside the palace, her advisors grew restless. Her chief minister, an elderly man named Ezekiel, stood before her with a look of great concern. "Your Majesty," he said cautiously. "The people, they have begun to question." Queen Eshe kept her expression unreadable. "Question what?" Ezekiel hesitated before bowing his head. "Who the father of your child is." A wave of unease settled over the throne room. The queen tightened her grip on the arms of her chair. She would not be shamed. She was their queen. But even she did not know the answer to their questions. The queen's desperate plan. That night, as she lay in her chambers, her heart burned with a single desire. "I must see his face." She had given herself to him, night after night. She had welcomed him, trusted him. But now, she was carrying his child. And he had disappeared. Why? She sat up in bed, her golden robe slipping from her shoulders. She could no longer sit in silence, hoping he would return. She needed to catch him. She devised a plan. "The next time he comes, I will see him. No matter what." She summoned her most trusted guards, warriors who had sworn their lives to her. "You will hide in the shadows of my chamber," she commanded. "When the stranger arrives, you will seize him. No harm must come to him, I only wish to see his face." The guards bowed and obeyed. They armed themselves, positioning themselves in the darkest corners of the room, where even the moonlight could not touch them. The queen dismissed her maids, dimmed the lanterns, and climbed into bed. Her heart raced. Would he come? Would she finally see him? She lay in wait, her eyes fixed on the window. But the night passed. And he did not come. Days turned to weeks. The next night, she tried again. And the next. And the next. But he did not return. Her body grew heavier with the weight of her child. Her heart grew heavier with despair. Had she frightened him away? Had he abandoned her? She lay awake in the silence, her arms cradling her growing belly. "Come back to me," she whispered into the darkness. But no one answered. The night of his return. 1 month passed. 2 months. The queen began to lose hope. Perhaps he had left her forever. Perhaps she would never see him again. And then, on a night when she least expected it, he returned. The moment she felt his presence, her heart leaped in her chest. He was here. At last. She opened her eyes, but the room was too dark. She felt his hands upon her, warm and familiar. But she would not let him slip away this time. "Who are you?" she whispered. No answer. Only a soft chuckle. "Why won't you show me your face?" she pleaded. Still, he did not speak. His touch made her body weak, made her forget the questions that burned inside her. But she would not let him escape again. She reached for the hidden golden lantern beside her bed and lit the flame. The chamber was bathed in a warm glow. But just as the light filled the room, the stranger vanished. A gust of wind swept through the chamber, extinguishing the flame. Queen Eshe gasped. The bed was empty. She turned in every direction, searching, but he was gone. As if he had never been there at all. A mystery that would not be ignored. Queen Eshe sat in the silence of her chambers, her hands trembling. She had come so close. But once again, he had slipped through her fingers. Her heart pounded. What kind of man could disappear into thin air? What kind of being had she given herself to? Her child kicked within her womb, as if sensing the queen's distress. She placed a hand over her belly, determination burning in her veins. You will not escape me forever, she whispered. One way or another, I will uncover the truth. But the truth, when it came, would be more terrifying than anything she had ever imagined. The hunt for the mysterious lover. The queen's pregnancy had become impossible to hide. Her once slender figure had transformed, her stomach round with the weight of the life growing inside her. The whispers in the kingdom had turned into an uproar. The people of Zonbara demanded answers. Who was the father of their future ruler? A kingdom in turmoil. In the marketplace, in the fields, in the halls of the palace, everyone spoke of the queen's mystery child. She has not taken a husband. No wedding, no suitor, no announcement. This is unnatural. The queen, once revered, now faced uncertainty. Some feared she had been cursed. Some believed the child was a gift from the gods. And others whispered darker things. The council of elders gathered in secret meetings, their wrinkled faces creased with worry. If the queen could not name the father, they feared a war for the throne. It was then that a summons was sent. A man who had not stepped foot in the palace for many years was called upon. The arrival of the chief priest. One evening, just as the sun began to set over the great walls of Zonbara, a lone figure entered the palace gates. He was tall, draped in a robe of deep blue, his staff carved with symbols older than the kingdom itself. His eyes, sharp and knowing, carried the weight of ancient wisdom. The chief priest of Zonbara had returned. The guards bowed as he passed, their heads lowered in reverence and fear. The queen stood at the top of the palace stairs, her heart pounding. The chief priest had been silent for years. His presence meant only one thing. Something unnatural was at play. The prophecy is spoken. The queen led the chief priest to her throne room. The air was heavy, charged with something neither of them could name. The chief priest took one look at her, then at her swollen belly, and sighed. He touched his staff to the floor, and the flames of every torch in the room flickered violently. Then, he spoke. A child without a known father cannot rule. The words struck like thunder. The queen's jaw clenched. I rule this kingdom, not tradition. The chief priest's gaze never wavered. Then tell us, my queen. Who is the father of your child? The room fell silent. The queen felt a lump in her throat. The truth was, she did not know. And silence was more dangerous than a lie. The chief priest stepped forward, voice low, heavy. This child is not ordinary. His fingers traced the air, and suddenly, a strange energy filled the room. This child does not belong to our world. A gust of wind blew through the throne room, though there were no open windows. The queen's fingers tightened around her throne. What do you mean? The chief priest's voice darkened. The father of your child is not human. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The queen's blood turned cold. Her mind raced, but she pushed the thought aside. No. That's impossible. Wasn't it? The hunt for the stranger begins. The queen stood. Her voice rang with authority. Then we will find him. She turned to her most trusted warriors, men who had sworn their lives to her service. Search the kingdom. Search beyond our borders. Find the man who has entered my chambers and vanished with the night. Her warriors bowed. They set off at once, searching through villages, forests, rivers, and distant mountains. Yet, no one had seen a man come or go. It was as if the father of her child did not exist. But the queen knew better. He was real. She had felt him. And she would prove it. The traps are set. When the search failed, the queen took matters into her own hands. She called for the finest trap makers in Zonbara, men who had spent their lives capturing the fastest beast of the wild. "Make no mistake," she said. "You are not catching an ordinary man. Whatever he is not bound by normal rules." They set traps around the palace, hidden wires, weighted nets, enchanted bindings woven with ancient spells. No shadow could pass without being caught. The queen waited. And waited. Night after night, she lay in her chamber, heart pounding, waiting for the return of the stranger. But he never came. Not even once. It was as if he knew. A power beyond their understanding. One night, the chief priest stood in the courtyard, staring at the moonlit sky. He closed his eyes, lifted his staff, and began to chant words in a tongue long forgotten. The air grew still. The kingdom seemed to hold its breath. Then, a sharp crack split the silence. The torches around the palace gates snapped in half. The sky darkened, though the moon shone bright. The chief priest's eyes flashed open. He turned slowly toward the queen. "Something unnatural is at play." She stared at him. "You've said that before." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But now, I can feel it." A force, one unseen, one ancient, was present. Not in the kingdom. Inside the palace itself. Watching. Listening. Waiting. The queen's blood ran cold. The father of her child was still here. But he was beyond their reach. And somehow, some way, he was always one step ahead. The truth is revealed. The night was heavy with tension. The chief priest stood in the center of the palace's grand hall, his deep blue robes flowing around him. The queen sat on her golden throne, her back straight, her expression unreadable. Surrounding them were the strongest warriors, the wisest elders, and the most trusted members of the royal court. The air felt thick, electric. Something was coming. Something unseen. Something terrible. The chief priest lifted his staff and struck it against the marble floor. "Bring forth the sacred mirror." A reflection of secrets. 2 temple guards stepped forward, carrying a large, ancient mirror. The surface of the mirror was not ordinary glass, it shimmered like liquid, swirling with colors that did not belong to this world. The queen's breath caught in her throat. She had heard of this sacred artifact before. The mirror of Mzuri. It was said to show the true nature of any who gazed into it. No deception. No illusion. Only truth. The chief priest turned to her. "Your Majesty, look into the mirror. If your child's father is among us, we will see him today." The queen's fingers tightened around the arms of her throne. She nodded. The guards lifted the mirror and held it before her. She took a deep breath and looked inside. And what she saw made her blood run cold. Surrounded by serpents. The room around her disappeared. The reflection in the mirror was not the grand palace. Not the gathered warriors. Not even herself. Instead, she saw snakes. Thousands of them. They coiled and slithered around her feet, her throne, her very body. Their golden eyes glowed in the darkness. She gasped, gripping her stomach, suddenly feeling the life inside her move. Her heart pounded. What did this mean? Gasps and murmurs filled the throne room. The chief priest's voice boomed through the chamber. "The father of the child is among us." The queen whipped around, her sharp eyes scanning every face in the room. But the warriors, the advisors, the servants, they all looked human. And yet, someone here was hiding the truth. Someone was not what they seemed. Her gaze landed on Jabari, the palace's most trusted warrior. And that's when she saw it. His hands trembled. A bead of sweat slid down his brow. His jaw clenched. He refused to look at the mirror. The queen's eyes narrowed. Jabari. His head snapped up. The room fell silent. The transformation begins. The chief priest raised his staff once more. Reveal yourself, he commanded. Jabari took a step back. I don't know what you mean, Your Holiness, he stammered. But the chief priest was already chanting. The words were ancient, powerful, vibrating through the air like a pulse of thunder. The ground beneath them shook. The flames in the torches flickered violently. And then, Jabari screamed. His body convulsed, his fingers curling like claws. The queen watched in horrified fascination as his skin began to shift. Patches of golden scales rippled across his arms. His muscles bulged, his veins darkened. His eyes, once deep brown, flashed yellow. And then, before their very eyes, his form twisted and stretched, his body warping between human and something else. Something ancient. Something not of this world. The queen gripped the arms of her throne. The warriors drew their swords, stepping back in fear. A deadly silence filled the room. And then, in a deep, echoing voice, Jabari spoke. I never meant to deceive you, my queen. He fell to his knees. I only wanted to love you. Jabari, the snake spirit in disguise. The queen's breath came in shallow gasps. She could hardly believe what was before her. Jabari. Her most trusted warrior. Her secret lover. The father of her unborn child. And yet, he was not a man at all. What are you? She whispered. Jabari lowered his head. I am one of the serpent spirits of the deep jungle. A creature of legend. A guardian of the ancient world. He lifted his eyes to hers, filled with sadness and longing. And I love you. The queen felt her heart twist. She did not know what to feel. Anger. Betrayal. Or something deeper. Something she could not name. The chief priest raised his staff. He has deceived us, my queen. His existence is an insult to our kingdom. The warriors moved forward, their swords gleaming. The queen stood suddenly, raising a hand. Stop. Everyone froze. The queen turned to Jabari, her voice shaking. Why did you come to me? Jabari bowed his head. Because I was drawn to you. His voice was raw, desperate. Because I have walked the earth for centuries, hiding in the shadows, never knowing love. And then, I found you. His golden serpent eyes gleamed with emotion. I did not want to deceive you. I only wanted to love you in the only way I knew how. Silence. The queen's heart pounded. She did not know what she had expected. An excuse. A lie. But instead, he had given her the truth. And now, she had a choice to make. A queen's dilemma. The queen looked around the room. She saw the fear in her warrior's eyes. The hatred in the chief priest's face. And then, she looked at Jabari. The man, the creature, who had given her something no other man could. Something she had longed for her entire life. Now, she had to decide. Would she accept him, despite what he was? Or would she destroy him, as tradition demanded? She took a deep breath, her decision forming. And when she finally spoke, her words would change the fate of Zonbara forever, the birth of the Serpent Prince. The grand hall of Zonbara stood in silence. The air was thick with tension, the weight of a decision that would change the kingdom's fate forever. Jabari, the warrior turned serpent spirit, knelt before the queen, his golden eyes filled with emotion. The chief priest stood firm, gripping his staff, his voice echoing through the chamber. If the child is born of a serpent, he cannot rule. A wave of murmurs spread through the gathered nobles and warriors. A prince who was not fully human. A ruler with the blood of a creature from the unseen world. It was unheard of. But then, the queen rose to her feet. Her gaze burned like fire, and when she spoke, her voice was like thunder rolling across the land. I will raise my child, no matter his form. The chief priest's eyes narrowed. Your Majesty, the gods do not bless unions between mortals and spirits. A curse may fall upon this kingdom. But the queen did not waver. She turned to the people of Zonbara. This child is my blood. He is of this land. He will not be cast aside. He will be the heir to the throne of Zonbara. The court was shocked. Warriors exchanged uneasy glances. Nobles murmured in uncertainty. The chief priest's face was like stone. You defy the ancient laws, my queen. But the queen stood tall. I make the laws. Her words rippled through the room. For a moment, there was only silence. And then, one by one, the warriors knelt before her. The nobles lowered their heads. The people of Zonbara bowed to their queen. A kingdom holds its breath. Months passed. The queen's pregnancy advanced, and all of Zonbara watched and waited. The chief priest, though he had not spoken against her decision, remained wary. There will be consequences, he warned. But no curse came. The skies remained clear. The rivers continued to flow. The crops still grew strong. And when the time came, on a night when the moon was full and glowing like silver, the queen went into labor. All of Zonbara held its breath. Would the child be man or beast? Would he be cursed or blessed? Would he even survive? The birth of a legend. The palace midwives gathered around the queen, their hands steady but their hearts racing. The winds howled outside, as if nature itself was waiting for the birth of this child. The queen cried out, gripping the silk sheets as waves of pain surged through her body. Jabari stood just beyond the chamber, his hands clenched into fists. Would the child be like him? Would he be accepted? Or would he be haunted? The final cry split the air, and then a sound. A single, piercing wail. The queen, panting, turned her head to see. And what she saw made tears fill her eyes. Her son. Born half human, half serpent. His skin was soft like a child's, but his eyes were golden, like Jabari's. His legs were human, but coiled beneath him was a sleek, serpentine tail, shimmering with golden scales. The midwives gasped. The chief priest stepped forward, peering at the newborn. The queen, weak but unshaken, held her child close. His name is Anari, she whispered. And he is the future of Zonbara. A prince unlike any other. As Prince Anari grew, so did his power. From the time he could walk, he could shift between two forms. One moment, he was a boy, running through the palace halls. The next, he was a golden serpent, slithering silently through the shadows. He was strong. He was clever. He was faster than any warrior, wiser than any elder. But most importantly, he was just. He spoke with kindness, ruled with fairness, and defended the people with unmatched skill. Over time, the fear faded. The people no longer whispered in doubt. Instead, they told stories of his greatness. They marveled at his wisdom. They cheered for his victories. And when the time came for him to wear the crown, the people of Zonbara bowed without hesitation. The Serpent King. Under King Anari's rule, Zonbara thrived. The kingdom became known far and wide, not just for its wealth or its power, but for its ruler, the man of two forms. The boy born of a serpent and a queen. The king who carried both the blood of man and the strength of the spirits. The Serpent King of Zonbara. And so, the legend lived on. Not as a curse. Not as a mistake. But as a tale of destiny. A tale that would be told for generations. A tale of a queen who defied the gods, a warrior who dared to love her, and a child who changed history forever. The end.